What up, everybody? Welcome to the Skolcial Network. It's myself with Brev. And Brev, we got a special guest with us today that we've been working on getting on for a little while now.
Yeah, I think everybody might have heard of him. It's from SKOR North, Phil Mackey. Phil, thank you very much. I know we've told you 1,000 times, but thank you very much for coming on. We're excited to
Oh,
have you on and talk to you.
no, thank you guys for just giving me another platform to spew my outlandish football and sports takes. I appreciate it.
Kirk hater.
Well, I think we got to start with I think Brev, just to clear the air, has a bone to pick with you that I think we just got to get out of the way right now.
Oh, wow. Let's get right into it. Let's do it.
Yeah, we got to talk about this as if you haven't enough already. This bar food draft, Phil, I love you. What are we doing, pal? I just need the thought process explained to me for like the Oysters over Buffalo Wings pick here.
Well, first of all, Buffalo Wings went first overall, if I
Okay.
recall correctly.
I got the order backward, I think, then.
So I mean, just so everyone can see my big board, okay?
Okay.
Dry rub bone-in wings would have been number one. That would have been the Andrew Luck, the Peyton Manning, whoever on my big board. And then the rest. So I think my guess is you're probably here to take shots at oysters and ahi tuna crisps, right?
Very smart, yeah.
So you got to keep in mind, I lived in Seattle for 2 years before coming back. So I'm from Minnesota originally. I'm 39 years old, and I spent the first 36 years of my life in Minnesota. And then my wife and I lived in Seattle for 2 years. Every bar in the entire city, including the dive bars, had oysters and ahi tuna crisps. So imagine going you're downtown Minneapolis, you're at Cuzzy's or whatever bar you can think of. Those types of bars in Seattle had amazing oysters and amazing just random seafood items. So people are like, boy, Phil, what kind of restaurants is Phil eating at? Is he eating at Ocean Air for every single meal? No, it's me living in Seattle for 2 years. I'm back in Minneapolis now the last couple years. And I fell in love with seafood and oysters and ahi tuna and poke and all sorts of random stuff. I also put tater tots on my team.
Good.
People are overlooking the tater tots, I feel like.
I still feel like that wouldn't, I don't know, that would have been what, pick number 5? Above, I don't know. I see some other ones in there I would have.
You're both out on tater tots. Wow.
I'm not
Not necessarily out. I'm looking
Un-American.
chicken tenders. I mean, Judd pulled that one in the final round. I'm thinking like that. I'd have that way. Even chips and dip. Maybe a spinach artichoke dip, whatever it is. I'd have that first.
I can get chips and dip at Cub Foods. I can just get Tostitos and some salsa.
It's a good point.
Give me a little something.
Fair.
My biggest regret is not drafting onion rings, to be honest. Onion rings are, I feel like I reached a little for the ahi tuna crisps. I stand by the oysters, and if I could have one mulligan, it would be onion rings in the bar food draft.
I think it was a very, very good explanation on your part, because, again, where you live is going to have a huge influence on what you eat. So it's a good explanation. I think my one that got left off here, I was shocked about that I feel passionately about, is mozzarella sticks.
Yeah.
But I guess to most people that aren't used to growing up having the oysters and the ahi tuna, I don't know what ahi tuna is. Is that real? Is it
it's I don't know. It's like a little. It's almost like imagine fish in steak form, sort of, but cold. Oh, it's the best way I can explain it. Yeah.
I saw you shout out Red Cow specifically for their ahi tuna crisp, and I love Red Cow. I'm not a seafood guy. I'm allergic to shellfish, so half your list
would send you
dead on arrival for me. Yeah, basically. But I did see you shout out Red Cow, so now my wife wants to try it next time we're up in Minnesota.
Okay.
She wants to get the ahi tuna crisp.
Red Cow and Red Rabbit, and there's now I sound like a shill for Red Cow, but there's 5 in the Twin Cities. But there's a Red Cow and a Red Rabbit a block from each other in Minneapolis, less than a mile from US Bank Stadium. And Red Rabbit has amazing oysters and wood-grilled oysters with Parmesan cheese if you want to Midwestern them. And then Red Cow has amazing ahi tuna crisps. So for anyone that looked at that list and said, what the hell, I've never had either one of those, try them at Red Rabbit, Red Cow. Get back to me and tell me if you would replace your jalapeno poppers with one of those items. If not, that's okay. More oysters for me.
I think I was speaking on behalf of the uneducated people like me who don't dabble in that often. Because like the uneducated mind would look at oysters and be like, that's kind of like having Kyle Hamilton in your lap and trading down and taking Lewis Scenes. So I guess for more of an educated take on it, that
Yeah,
makes
and I
kind
would
of
say that the mozzarella sticks more of a Lewis scene, and
oh, okay.
you know, and I'm you know, mozzarella sticks, but they get cold really quickly, and you know, they kind of sit there.
You're missing the real answer, which is cheese curds, which would have won you over the Midwest vote. Also, sleeper, but fried pickles, I would have definitely put on the list.
Fried pickles are phenomenal. Also at the state fair, I can't remember what they call it, but they have like these. It's like pickles wrapped in ham with cream cheese as the layer between.
I've
Oh
seen
my
those with
gosh.
bacon, not
Oh,
ham, but that's interesting.
I need to
so
get
good.
out more apparently.
Yeah.
We'll do a day at the state fair, and
Sounds
we'll
like
find
it.
we'll find everything except for ahi tuna and oysters. Is my guess.
Works for me.
When I went up to Virginia, Brev and I went to TGI Fridays, and he didn't even know half the menu. He leaves the house so infrequently, apparently. But I feel like we obviously, we're two guys who built a following, just tweeting random Vikings takes 99% of the time, probably just coming out of thin air. Um, Obviously, I think most people have probably seen outside of the podcast, maybe snippets or just clips or tweets out of context, and have kind of assigned you as this leader of an anti-Kirk Cousins army previous to this offseason.
That's fine. Yeah.
Personally, I think that's a little bit of a misunderstanding on the matter, just to be honest. Where do you think that like misunderstanding, misrepresentation maybe comes from? Because I think when you actually listen to you, that's not the case.
Well, if we're grading everyone who talks about the Vikings or tweets about the Vikings or has thoughts about the Vikings on a curve, I am definitely on the far end of the anti-Kirk end of the grading scale. So I don't even, from that perspective, I don't think it's a misunderstanding to say, boy, Phil is awfully negative over the years on Kirk Cousins compared to the rest of the fan base, the rest of the local media. And it's funny because like now that the Vikings have essentially taken the path forward that I've been begging them to take for 3 or 4 years, and to back up a step, I thought the original Kirk contract was absolutely the right move in 2018 because you had a team that won 13 games. You had a great defense. You had Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Dalvin Cook. You had weapons, and it felt kind of like the 2008 into 2009 Vikings where, man, if you can just get a reliable trigger man and he can spread the ball around, you've got all this other stuff. As Brett Favre said, the pieces are in place back in 2009. That's what it kind of felt like, unless you thought Keenum was going to continue to be that guy. And most people felt like, all right, that was a fun year, but man, that guy got away with a lot of sort of end over end throws and just it felt like a backup playing the best football of his life. So when they signed Kirk in 2018, I was all on board. All right, let's do it. Guaranteed money, whatever. You got cap space. But that was their window, 2018 and 19, when they had still a top 5, top 10 defense. They had amazing weapons, and they had Dalvin Cook. The offensive line wasn't the worst in the NFL. It was kind of middle of the pack. And they missed the playoffs in 2018. They win one playoff game in 19 and then get smoked on the road. Look at me. I'm getting all worked up and hitting my microphone now.
I'm bringing up years of trauma that are just coming out all at once.
So I felt like after the first couple of years, okay, well, that was a fun experiment. It didn't work. Now you're going to have to start to make some hard decisions with players, or your defense is going to age out, which it did. Kirk was plopped in not to be the centerpiece of the team, but to be the final piece to put the team over the top. But when the dynamic shifted to where, hey, now you're going to have imperfect rosters based on the money that you make, you're not going to be able to have a ton of cap space, and you're not going to draft perfectly. So, people always want to hammer the front office. Now, lately, I think there's like 2022 draft was a disaster. We can talk about that. It felt to me like if this is turning toward Kirk as the centerpiece, I want off the ride. To me, he's not that guy. He's one of the 12 to 15 best quarterbacks in the world, but there's a difference between Mahomes and Allen and like Mahomes. You can say, hey, we got to say goodbye to Tyreek Hill because we can't afford him anymore because of your contract. Are we going to be okay? And Patrick Mahomes says, yes, we'll still win back-to-back Super Bowls. And so I don't know. I just feel like it's not all of it is Kirk's fault. Very little of it is Kirk's fault in terms of like, the team not winning a Super Bowl. But the money that he was making for years and years and the position that he was put in to be the leader of this team, I need more than one playoff win over the course of your entire career. I need more, like no winning of note in high school, no winning of note in college, unless you want to count an Outback Bowl. He is a cog in the machine, and it felt like the Vikings were sort of building their franchise around him. And it wasn't a train wreck because you're still going to win. Like he's good enough to where you're going to win 7, 8, 9 games once in a while. And maybe you pop up for more. But I was just ready to do something different for 3 or 4 years. And the more that they went and ran it back again and ran it back again, my criticism got louder. So anyways, long point longer. I don't think it's unfair to say that, Phil, you're a Kirk hater. I mean, I praise him when it's warranted. And I tell the truth when, at least the truth as I see it, when I feel like it's warranted. And I think one last point on this. I think there's a misconception among all sports fans. There's like a pandemic among sports fans in 2023, 2024, that if you aren't undyingly loyal and positive in everything you say about your favorite team or the team that you cover if you're in the media, then you're a bad fan or you're a hater. But if again, you can disagree with what I think the truth is, but if I'm speaking my mind and giving an opinion and telling my truth, it doesn't mean that I'm a hater. It means I'm giving you my opinion. And if you disagree with it, that's totally fine. We can have a debate. But at the end of the day, my middle ground stance on Kirk Cousins was he is not good enough at the money that he was making for the Vikings to build a championship caliber team. Well, I mean, I was right. And now they've moved into, I think, a better model, which is rookie scale contract quarterback. Hopefully they nailed the J.J. McCarthy pick. You got a bunch of cap freedom in 2025. It looks like you've nailed the Jordan Addison draft pick. You've got some interesting pieces on defense. You might have found your edge rusher of the future in Dallas Turner, your quarterback of the future. You got one of the best wide receiver tandems in the NFL. You've got bookend franchise offensive tackles. So I like the blueprint now more than the previous few years. They might have a worse record in 2024, but I feel like they're building towards something with higher upside. So that's my point.
I think that about sums it up. I love that. And I think it took, at least for me, I can't speak for anyone else, including Brev, but it maybe took me a little longer to get there because I was so desperate to see us win that I thought that blind optimism would somehow, as if for 60-something years, the Vikings fans across the world haven't been blindly optimistic, hoping it would make something positive happen. But do you think, you had mentioned like the 2022 draft and things like that, and maybe how imperfect drafting played into that. Is this decision this year to finally say, hey, you know what? We're going to set a boundary. We're only going to offer Kirk 1 year. We're going to prep, even if he does come back, for the quarterback of the future, whatever that looks like. Does that forgive a little bit of maybe the sting of the 2022 draft and maybe an imperfect start to Kwesi's tenure?
Yeah, it's man, if you look at that draft now, it is Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth are probably on the outside of the 53-man roster bubble right now before training camp starts. And then you look at Brian Asamoah, who was their, third-round pick, and he was beat out last year by an undrafted free agent, Ivan Pace. I mean, credit to the Vikings for finding Ivan Pace as an undrafted free agent. He looks like a multi-year starter. And then Caleb Evans looks like, I think if the season started today, Mekhi Blackman's probably starting on the outside. Shaq is probably starting on the other outside, and then Byron Murphy Jr. So it is it's rough, but Jordan Addison, they nailed that, and to find a couple undrafted free agents, namely Ivan Pace, over the last couple of years helps too. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was just Kwesi comes in, he's a new general manager, Kevin O'Connell's a new head coach, and they just kind of rushed and botched the lead up and the preparation in the chaos of the 8 weeks that you get when you get hired. But it looks like they've settled in. I love, it's funny, people keep hammering them for the draft value charts this last draft. Well, if you look at the math on the draft value charts, they gave up the equivalent of, okay, time out for a second. They traded up for a quarterback and an edge rusher that were top 10 on consensus big boards, and they landed those guys with the 10th and 17th picks. And, well, but they gave up too much to move up to 17. Okay, but they weren't doing the math to move up to 17. They were doing the math to get the 9th best player on the board in Dallas Turner. So, like, I kind of love what they did in this last draft process-wise, and we'll have to see, just the bulk if they wound up getting some starters in the other rounds that they didn't get in 2022. But it looks on paper like they've got this thing going in the direction that maybe they had planned 3 years ago, but had to wait because of the 13-win season. So I feel like Vikings fans should be really excited. This year is kind of a free roll. If I think they can make the playoffs this year, I don't think they're a favorite to make the playoffs. So this year's kind of a free roll, and then the window, bam, opens up wide in 2025. So I think it's exciting from that perspective.
Yeah, I think definitely. I really like what you said about like about with fans. It's almost like, because I've only been super involved on Vikings Twitter for like 3 years now, maybe. And I'd always see clips of you and people like, oh, Mackey being super negative again about Kirk. And I'm like, all right, well, I got to see this. So then I actually watch Purple daily. And then you say things that like just make complete sense. And I don't understand how people disagree with the fact that Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, but he's probably not the guy. He could be a quarterback on a team that goes to win the Super Bowl, but he's not going to be Patrick Mahomes going and winning that Super Bowl. So I think it's a good point, and just your point about fans. It's almost like, and I'm sure every fan base does it, but like Vikings fans to a certain degree lying to themselves. Like I
Yeah.
remember saying Jordan Love is a good quarterback, and my follower count dropped a couple right after
Yeah,
I
dude.
did that. I'm like, what?
Right.
Just because I'm being honest, like I don't understand that thought process.
Yeah,
And
it's almost like if you don't live in a world where everything Packers is garbage and everything Vikings is the best in the NFL, then even though that doesn't reflect reality, that you're a bad fan of some kind. So we need to stop telling people how to be fans in that regard. And by the way, like if you the way that you engage with sports is to just be as optimistic and positive as humanly possible, that's cool too.
yeah,
You go ahead, be whatever fan you want to be. But if you have people in your friend circle that are looking at a team that, like the Vikings are 4-4 last year and Kirk Cousins tears his Achilles tendon, that would have been a good time to get a second round pick for Danielle Hunter. Oh no, you can't bail. You can never bail on a season. I mean, right now, would you rather have had that second round pick for a guy that went and signed? So there's always little things to criticize. I don't know. I feel like Purple Daily, especially in the last 2 or 3 months, now that they've drafted a quarterback of the future, and the reviews on Dallas Turner are fantastic so far. This is about the most optimistic and positive that we've been for a 4-month stretch in the 4 or 5 years we've been doing the podcast, for sure.
Do you think like a lot of that is, to Brev's point, just a general sports fan thing, or do you think it's especially bad in Minnesota amongst the fans?
I think it's a sports fan thing. I think, well, it's not even just a sports fan thing. It's a societal thing. The tribalism of, I mean, even if like, not to like get into the political weeds, but if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you don't criticize everything in your own party is perfect and the way that it should be, and the other party is garbage. It's like it couldn't possibly be that you lean toward some principles over here, but you know what? There's a couple things over there that are, or you know what? If I could really look inward with my team or my political party or whatever it is, yeah, these 2 or 3 things kind of bother me, and I wish they would be different. It's like if you don't fall in line and speak positively and buy into the tribalism, then you're not loyal. You're a hater. So I think if we could just ban the word hater from the internet's vernacular, it would be a better place to engage.
Mackey 2024.
I think it might be too late to get him on the ballot, but we could try, I guess.
Well,
There's putting anybody on the ballot.
Can we find someone under the age of 80 on the ballot? It'd be great.
Yeah. And to your point about like the fans and everything, I guess short of the Vikings winning the Super Bowl, which I hope we win one before we die, what do you think it would take for, and again, it's a sports fan thing in general. What would bring together this fan base? Because Kirk Cousins was the big red flag, I guess. The line is in the sand. You're either very pro, you're very against. And it seems like every quarterback in that, like the Goff, the Tua, everybody in that like 12 to 15 to 18 range, every fan base with those quarterbacks does this. But now that he's out, what is it going to take for Vikings fans to come? Because even some are like, I don't know if McCarthy's the guy, which is fair, but I don't know. What do you think?
I think we have, unless he's just like atrocious out of the gate and he doesn't get better, it's like a Ponder situation, which I don't think it's going to be. I think they're totally different personalities and different level prospects, but I think we have like a 4 or 5 year buffer until the contract discussion pops up, where most fans are going to be supportive now and come together behind this ball of clay that is JJ McCarthy. And then the contract discussion gets a little complicated because, like, if you ask me, I think you want to be in one of two bins. There's like 3 bins of quarterback situations in football. There's having a Hall of Famer or a borderline Hall of Famer who makes any amount of money, whether it's 50 million or rookie scale. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. We could debate, how many quarterbacks are actually in that group. I think a healthy Joe Burrow is in that group. Maybe Lamar Jackson, but the playoff success hasn't been there. Like Aaron Rodgers before the Achilles. Write a blank check, whatever you need to do to keep those quarterbacks, and then figure out your roster around those guys. If you need to take away a weapon for cap purposes, like the Chiefs did, it doesn't matter. You can still win because those guys can carry you. So that'd be a great bin. If JJ McCarthy could be part of that bin, it'd be the first time since, well, I don't know, probably the 1 year of Brett Favre in 2009 that you've had like that guy that can carry you and elevate whoever it is. And then the second bin that you want to be a part of, if you can't be a part of the first bin, is a cheap and good quarterback who can at least drive the car, but allows you to build out offensive line and defense and all these weapons. And it's funny because the Vikings drafted Tavares Jackson and Christian Ponder and Teddy Bridgewater, not that those guys panned out. In fact, a couple of those guys were complete busts. They were able to re-sign some of their players and bring in free agents and make a trade for Jared Allen over here and build out great rosters and still win 10 games in a division a couple times, despite how crappy those young quarterbacks were. So you can at least build something around a cheap quarterback. And the bin that I would not advise the Vikings to go back to, which is having a non-elite quarterback making top of the line money or a top cap number, because it just again, you're going to be competitive and you might make the playoffs, but you're probably not actually winning a Super Bowl. And I know people are going to shout out, well, here's this one example from 20 years ago and this other example from 10 years ago. And yeah, like there are outliers, but do you want to build your team and your blueprint around outliers, or do you want to try and build something sustainable? Best case scenario, JJ McCarthy pans out and the Vikings have a 10 to 15 year absolute stud, and you're sitting here with a couple Super Bowl runs and we get to do some things that we've never done as a fan base.
Is it fair to say you probably want your franchise quarterback to work on Tuesdays?
That would be great. That'd be great. Yeah. Boy, that was a hot button topic too. Yeah. Just poking. Just poking.
It's fun now that it's kind of become a meme. I enjoy that. It has been very interesting to see people be willing to make fun of Kirk now, especially given how things went down with the totally illegitimate tampering allegations. Apparently.
Oh my gosh. So, by the way, I see a lot of people making those jokes now about Kirk that were hammering guys like me and us that were making the same jokes when he was in a Vikings uniform. We can poke him when he's in a Falcons uniform, but not when he's here. So, yeah, I think the tampering thing is interesting because the NFL basically said, yeah, do whatever you want. Worst case scenario, you'll be docked a 5th round pick. So whatever you have to do to get your $40 million franchise quarterback, which, by the way, they were so impressed with him that a month and a half later, they used the 8th overall pick to draft his replacement. So we'll see how that goes in Atlanta.
That was so awesome. I love when you guys did the live show for the draft reaction. I love the reaction in the room. I stood up in my living room and was like, what are they doing? It was like when the Bears, man. It was complete. Of course, the context is completely different. Like when the the Bears traded up one pick to draft Trubisky in 2017, 2018. I was like, well, what's happening right now? But yeah, I don't know. I think you're right in that, because we talked a little bit about this on the last show that we did. Every team to a degree, I think, does it, but this, like you said, was the NFL's, like, this was their chance to be like, don't do this, and they missed the mark. So I don't.
Yeah.
That just sets a precedent.
Yeah, if
Yeah,
there's
it was a
any
slap on
thought
the
that the
wrist.
NFL exactly, if there's any thought that the NFL cares about tampering, they don't. They're
Yeah.
basically telling the Falcons, guys, can you just not talk about it at the press conference? You know, can we not put moving boxes on Instagram 3 weeks
Man.
beforehand? You know, that's the funny thing. The Cousins family was packing boxes on Instagram like 2 weeks beforehand. And Kirk's talking about how, yeah, I had a great time golfing with the trainer, whatever he was saying.
No, it's okay.
Bro.
Julie's parents are in Georgia. It's fine.
Yeah,
Nothing
no.
to see here.
Her
And
dad, I just happened to talk about how passionate of a Falcons fan my father-in-law is, but it means nothing.
Yeah.
it even goes back to the combine. Like Kevin O'Connell, they did an interview with Kevin O'Connell in the booth. And he's like, "Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was along the lines of, yeah, there's probably some talks going on here that shouldn't be had." But it's like, you had the chance to like really just kind of cut this off. And if there's, why is, maybe I'm just like grammar police, which really I'm not, but like, why is it called legal tampering period? Is there a legal
I hate
murder
it.
period? Like, I don't, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think, well, the NFL calls it something else because legal tampering is kind of
Probably.
a media creation. They
Yeah.
call it,
Hmm.
I think they call it the negotiation window,
Right.
where you can talk. But that's the funny thing. Even when the negotiation window opens for the first time, and presumably, okay, everyone's contacting each other for the first time, and you're hammering out these complicated contracts worth $100+ million guaranteed. Yeah,
10
but
seconds later, you get these announcements with these crazy details of contracts that have obviously been in the works for weeks at that time.
yeah, they should just open it up. You know what? Once the season's over, do whatever you want. If you want to, you can't officially ink the contract until a certain date. But if you want to flirt with someone and take them out to dinner at, the steakhouse at the combine, do whatever you got to do.
I think we should do recruiting trips, make it like college. Take them to TCO, show it off, take them to Manny's. I
Yeah.
think
That used to be
It'd be
way more
good.
prominent that free agents would want to come in and visit. Like the Vikings, this is like 15 years ago. The Vikings brought in LaDainian Tomlinson for a visit
I
one
remember
time,
that.
and TJ Hushmanzada. And somewhere along the line, everyone just decided, and maybe the pandemic, when everyone's doing Zoom calls and stuff, like, I don't need to fly out. If you give me like 50 million guaranteed, I'll just trust that you guys have a weight room and a steakhouse. We can skip that part.
I know you had mentioned earlier, hey, 2024 is the reset. We'll hit the ground running in 2025. Obviously, there might still be a couple pieces to work out between now and then, but is there a window, like a time frame where you can kind of look as best you can now and say, all right, by this point, if things aren't cooking at a degree more than they were over the last few years, maybe the experiment with Kwesi and McCarthy, heck, maybe even KOC, maybe is worth reconsidering and hitting the reset again? Are we talking like 2030?
I would say, barring a total train wreck, 2024 and 2025 are, hey, if those guys need extensions, because I think those guys signed 4-year deals.
I know
KOC and
Kwesi did. I'm not sure about KO.
So I think they were aligned with 4-year deals. So extend them beyond the duration of the 4-year contract. Like, no, to me, no question. Now, if they start 0-9 or some crazy thing happens and there's mutiny in the locker room, which I don't expect any of that to be the case, I would expect the Vikings to win 9 games before I would expect them to be drafting like first, second, or third overall. So the next checkpoint would be, okay, we're 2 years into the JJ McCarthy thing. Is JJ McCarthy panning out? Is Dallas Turner panning out? And are the Vikings back in the playoffs at some point, 2024, 2025? So the next checkpoint would be like the 2026 season. But to me, that's kind of the earliest that I would look to do an audit here, unless something crazy happens. Is that fair?
I would say.
I think so. And I don't even want to like ponder the possibility that like things don't work out because of course I'm a fan. Um, like if something were to happen, I don't know if they would. It would be drastic, like 0-9 or something. If something were to happen, I feel like it'd be maybe like Quasey getting the boot first, and then Kevin. I don't know if that makes sense because they're starting 0-9. It's probably Kevin's fault, but I don't know. They seem tied at the hip, so if
Yeah.
something's gonna go down, I guess the sink will ship the ship will sink with both captains. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. I think you're right though that KOC seems to be on more solid ground than Quasi, just because that 2022 draft
Yeah,
is looming. And if they do wind up cutting Lewis Seen and Andrew Booth, you'd be cutting your first and second round picks from that year. And that's going to be something that becomes a talking point maybe in like 2 or 3 months before the season. So that's going to, yeah, like that's going to, if those guys don't make the roster, that will be a discussion point among fans and media the week before the season starts. But that's like, I think we can all kind of see it on the horizon. And I think we're all accounting for the fact that, yep, those guys aren't a factor and the team still provides some interesting pieces and some optimism.
I think the draft was a disaster. There's nothing you can do to kind of like make it a super positive thing. But even if Quasi were to cut Booth and Scene both this year, yeah, that would suck because those are two. The Scene pick from the beginning, I was like, I don't get it. But the Booth pick kind of made sense at the time, so I give him a little bit of leniency there. But even
Yeah.
if they do release them going into the season, I think you can kind of positively spin zone it into, well, Quasi cut two of his guys pretty quick into their careers, so maybe he's not prone to just hanging on to his guys and feeding his
Yeah.
ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Move off your mistake. Don't compound one mistake by fighting for. I agree. Like because you're not going to bat 1,000 and you're not going to have perfect drafts. So can you make the right decision and get to the next thing, which it looks like they're going to be willing to. I mean, I think Theo Jackson is ahead of Lewis Seen on the safety depth chart right now. And that's not a
Mhm.
Yeah.
knock on Theo Jackson because he's actually been good in the workouts and even last training camp.
Even in
Yeah.
what he did last, I think Brev, was it the Eagles game he came in, dropped a pick, and then immediately got a pick that we were talking
He
about a few weeks
he
ago?
he got toasted
That's
when
what it
he
was.
came in, and then he got a pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
To your
uh,
point, Mackey, like, obviously it looks really bad when your first draft is that bad, but Spielman over his course, like I think a 2016 with Treadwell, Mackenzie Alexander, Willie Beavers, Kentrell brothers, Moritz Boringer, David Morgan, Stephen Weatherly, and Jaron Curse, their seventh round picks ended up probably being the most
Yeah.
sustainable, I think. And Weatherly's mainly known for Diggs roasting him. So like,
Yeah.
and he got what, 6 years, 5 years after that?
Moritz Boringer is one. That's the best name
missing
on that list. The German
missing.
wide receiver.
Didn't
The
he go to
German
Cincinnati
Megatron.
after for like a training camp and then he never did anything in the league?
Yeah. It's kind of now he does like German football camps.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's kind of like the Booth thing with that selection being probably the right one at the time, like the Treadwell selection at that time. Like that's what, and they're different players, but like I don't credit Quasey as like a football visionary for drafting Jordan Addison just because like that was the right pick. Your refrigerator kept the food cold. Good job, Quasey. Treadwell, Laquan Treadwell is like, I mean, he should have panned out. So I don't even know how much you can blame Rick for that.
that's the crazy thing about receivers. Quarterbacks are kind of like this, but receivers, it's like all of these dudes put up 1,300 yards in college in the SEC or whatever, and they light it up, and then their combine measurements are all usually pretty awesome. And at the end of the day, you don't know if you're drafting a Jalen Rager or a Justin Jefferson or a Laquan Treadwell or whoever, a Nico Collins or somebody. It's and you find out real quick. You're like, oh man, this dude can't run a route.
Did you
Doesn't know
guys
he
see?
doesn't.
There was a tweet. It was like any receiver can look good out of context, and somebody in the Vikings fan base made a TikTok like hype edit of Laquan Treadwell. I think it was like 12 plays, and it was like a minute and a half long. Oh,
Laquan Treadwell.
That's
that
amazing.
that was like this last week. I watched that, and I was like, and people were replying. They were like, I know he was bad, but like even when he looks good, he looks bad.
Yeah.
Wild times.
That's hilarious.
But with that, Brev, do you have any more questions? Anything more on your mind? I think you settled the seafood thing. I think you're going to eat oysters tonight. I think Phil sold you.
Let's make it happen.
I will probably not be doing that, but
we can load them up. We can load them up with some sauce, with some horseradish if you want.
I'll be open to trying that. I don't know any seafood places around here, so maybe I'll do some research and I'll tweet at you guys if I try.
I mean, you're closer to the water than either one of us. Like you're on the East Coast, man. You could just reach in.
That was a really, really bad excuse. You're completely right.
To be fair, I don't know if the DMV is specifically known for its seafood quality, but maybe
it absolutely is.
Even DC. Oh, I don't. Well, I guess it's not that far. I have no context.
Crabs,
Maryland.
Maryland crabs are like.
Yep.
Not the STD, but like the food, you know.
Right. Maryland, maybe both for Maryland.
Probably both. Yeah.
Well, Phil, we appreciate having you, man. Thank you so much. Obviously, I think most people know, but people can find you on SKOR North on Twitter. What you have is Flagrant Howl still going right now, or is it spread out a little bit?
Yeah.
So you got that Purple Daily and O-line.
Yeah. So we have at SKOR North. So O-line committee. That's been one of the most fun. That's a project just sort of off to the side with me and Alex Boone and Jeremiah Searles, 2 former Vikings offensive linemen. And I played right guard in 8th grade, so I have a lot to offer when it comes to offensive line breakdowns too. But yeah, we do podcasts every week and film breakdowns. And then on the SKOR North side, Purple Daily, which is 365 days a year for the last 5 years. And Flagrant Howls has become, I think, maybe next to Purple Daily, the second most fun thing, with the Wolves becoming relevant and Anthony Edwards. But we've got podcasts at SKOR North that cover every team and some other contributors. So if you're new, check them out. Let us know what you think.
Will do. I'm sure there'll be some fun. What is there any specific off-season drama we need to watch out for with the Timberwolves? I think I'm a little more casual. I hopped on the bandwagon, admittedly.
Yeah, no, that's welcome to the bandwagon. The Wolves once every 20 years give people a reason to jump on. It's like driving through the desert down there in the Southwest where there's an exit once every however many miles. The Wolves give you an exit every 20 years. But so the crazy thing about the NBA schedule, it's a little bit like the NFL, where the off season is just as exciting as the regular season in some ways. So the NBA Finals ended last night with Boston winning. Next Wednesday and Thursday, so a week after the finals end, is the NBA draft, and the Wolves do have a first-round pick. And then I think it's 3 days after that is when free agents can agree to contracts. So you've got, and trades and everything else. So you've got like 3 to 4 weeks now of potential NBA chaos. And then the Wolves ownership situation is up in the air and headed to courts sometime in August or September. Anthony Edwards playing in the Olympics in late July, I believe. So it'll be a lot of Wolves stuff. If you're a crossover Vikings and Timberwolves fan, a lot of Timberwolves stuff the next 2 or 3 months.
And if you're a Wild fan, there ain't shit happening this offseason.
Nope. There's not jack. They're still in cap hell from Parisi and Suter's contracts, unfortunately.
Yeah, shout out to Judd's Hockey Show as well on SKOR North.
Amen.
Well, we appreciate it, Mackey. We'll see you guys next week, and thanks for joining us.